welcome to today's edition of One Single Story. It is August the 26th, day 238. I don't know what I was getting ready to say, but it went 238. And we are in Lamentations 5, so this is the second day of Lamentations. And I'll just read. It says, Lord, remember what has happened to us. See how we have been disgraced. Our inheritance has been turned over to strangers, our homes to foreigners. We are orphaned and fatherless. Our mothers are widowed. We have to pay for water to drink, and even firewood is expensive. Let me read a couple more verses, and then we'll be able to come back. It says, those who pursue us are at our heels. We are exhausted, but are given no rest. We submitted to Egypt and Assyria to get enough food to survive. Our ancestors sinned, but they have died, and we are suffering the punishment they deserved. Slaves have now become our masters, and there is no one left to rescue us. So they are experiencing some tremendous consequences, it appears, when you read it, that they have basically lost everything. Freedom, resources, homes, land. They're submitted to people who were once their slaves. Loss is a painful thing. Just from a personal standpoint, what are some of the greatest losses that you have ever had in your life, if you feel comfortable? I'll ease the pain a little bit for you, and I'll go first. To a certain degree, this few first verses I resonated with. I don't know that everybody's ever been in the position that I'm getting ready to describe, but I went through a period in my life from I was in my early 30s where I literally lost everything. And lost is a terrible word to use because I just lit a match to it. Loss is to say it wasn't. Loss lends itself to believe it wasn't my fault, But for the most part, I was the one lighting the match to the whole thing. Family, reputation, resources, my home that I lived in, the church I pastored, everything in a matter of weeks was gone. And I didn't have a place to live. I spent 60 days motel to motel, town to town. Even sitting here thinking about it now, I think, gosh, that was a really, really difficult time. That even still today has shaped some of who I am. I want to be clear. Some, I think, for the better. I think I'm a better person about some things, but I think there are some consequences after the fact that are difficult to deal with, where family is concerned, even reputation is concerned, things that are difficult to get back. And when you are in those situations, I look back and I think about how the way I would describe it is lonely. That's how I would describe it. How lonely it felt, where nothing seemed to be going right. Mm-hmm. And when you're in those moments, I think there are people listening who are going through moments where it feels like nothing going right and everything is going away. So I don't know if y'all have. So I figured I'd lead out with something to take the pressure off of you, no matter what you say.
We can't measure up with that. So. No, I've had multiple losses at different times and seasons of my life. I've had financial losses. I know what it's like to have absolutely nothing. I mean that. I mean, literally where you don't know how you're going to pay the bills that month. I have been there. That's a significant loss. I've had relational losses where some of them were people passed, that were very near and dear to me, and that's a tremendous loss. But I think the ones that hurt the most are people that are still in existence that you once were in relationship with, and for whatever reason, you no longer are. Mm-hmm. Whether you and I'm going to say, I'm going to make the assumption that I contributed to it as much as another person did, but I think those are even more painful. I've suffered physical losses, mm-hmm.
That
have literally put me on my back for weeks upon weeks upon weeks. And
would you describe? So we're only a year,
about a year and a half. You'll soon be 2 years. Yeah.
Would you describe that as the toughest time of your life, or no? At least physically. Yeah,
at least physically, but mentally and emotionally as well. Where you don't know if you're going to recover. You don't know what the future looks like.
Or you wished you were dead.
Oh, yeah. And I've shared my testimony publicly, I think, one time, where I plainly said, a few days into that, I was to that point where death would have been welcomed, because you just get to a point because of the pain that's uncontrollable, the unknown. And, when you're in that crisis, it seems like it will never end. Mm-hmm. If I could have seen even 6 months down the road or a year, even though it was still painful in that process, and still is, there's still limitations and sometimes pain, but nothing to the degree it used to be. But could I have even seen a little further down the road, I think it would have helped me transition through that process. And
why don't you say what it is? Because there will be people that don't know what happened.
So I fell from about 20 foot up and broke my femur in several places, and my back in one place, compressed vertebrae, pretty significant, and broken wrist, and all the other muscle tears and ligaments and stuff that goes along with that. And 11 days in the hospital, and then in a hospital bed for weeks and even months to come, and it's been a long, difficult journey, and through that, there were times that were better than others, but as time goes on, things get a little better. You start to see a little more, and through all this lamenting taking place, it's like they're desperate just to get a glimpse of something that's going to improve or change.
Right. I think it's that loss of hope.
Yeah.
That really is. You can experience a lot of pain and a lot of suffering and loss, but if you have that hope,
yep,
then you're able to get through it, because there's better times coming. It's when you lose that hope. And
yep.
I think of right when Tyler and I graduated from college, and we had plans, and then there was, outside of our control, a financial crisis in the United States. A housing bubble burst that year. I remember watching the news and being like, oh, this doesn't, because you'd watch news and it wouldn't really concern you. And then all of a sudden, I remember watching it one time, and it clicked that we're going to be looking for jobs in this economy. Mm-hmm. And it was tough. And then things just didn't work out and didn't work out and didn't work out. And it was that losing of hope at times that was the most painful. That was like, are we ever going to get to a point where we have a job where we're happy and where we're able to make enough money that we're not scraping by and putting this on credit cards, and groceries now at the end of the month are going on credit cards, that's the thing that I think really just makes any situation tougher, is when you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, where there is no hope. It was interesting when you use the word hope. I remembered I was listening to a podcast this past, last week or two, and he made an interesting statement. He was talking about the lottery. And he said a lot of wealthy people, and that's how he described it, wealthy people view the lottery as a tax on the poor. He said, but what if you're in that person's shoes? He said, what if buying that $2 ticket gives them just a little bit of hope that things can be better? He said, if $2 is the cost of hope for somebody who's hopeless, he said, let them have $2 worth of hope, that things it may not be, it may never get better for them, but the expectation that things can be better. Because if you lose that expectation, and there are probably people who are listening to us talk, and there's a reason why it's called Lamentations. It's not the book of joy. It is, these times are tough. And even as I'm sitting here listening to us talk, it's heavy, it's, weighty, you're reliving, each of us are reliving some of those moments that for us, and we're on the other side of it. We've seen that there is a way to get out. And I think those losses in life sometimes cause us, and it makes us desperate, because that's one of the second pieces that I wanted to talk about, because verse 5 and 6 says, those who pursue us are at our heels, we're exhausted. We submitted to Egypt and Assyria to get enough food to survive. So they submitted to the enemy just so that they could get by. And the question that I wrote down is, how do we submit to wrong things hoping just to survive or succeed? What are some things, maybe the lottery is a perfect example, I don't know, but what are some things that we submit to because we're afraid, or we just want to get by, or we want to avoid the conflict?
I think one of the practical things that come to my mind is in relationships, that husbands and wives sometimes submit to relationships outside of marriage because they're in a desperate situation that's been difficult, overbearing, prolonged, where they don't feel like there's any hope, and they use the term here, submit to, compromise, I think would be another term, and that's never an excuse, but you understand a lot of times why people do things. People who are hopeless often turns to drugs or alcohol, in their despair, looking for that cheap $2 fix, to address, to give some moment of hope to them, and again, it creates more problems and more consequences. But we are people that, if not guarded, will submit to authorities and things that we perhaps never would have considered previously if we were not in that condition.
Yeah, I think that a $2 lottery ticket is a pretty benign way to get hope. But I can think of some televangelists who are like, send me $100 and that is your seed, and that is the hope they have. And I think that is a much more toxic way, that you're thinking that this is magically going to make God give you whatever you need. And I think that is a way that I
didn't mean to laugh, but when she was saying that a couple years ago or so, it could have been longer, but I was up one night, it was 2 or 3 in the morning. I was going through the Christian channels first, and there was somebody on there selling.
Tell me their number and I can tell you who it is. But they all got a specific number.
But what I laughed at, though, when you're talking about false hope and deceiving people, you make this amount of contribution, and you're going to get this 25% larger vial of new and improved holy water.
You weren't expecting to be honored.
And that's kind of what I did, except I wasn't drinking water at the time.
And for those of you who are just watching and not, just listening and not watching, I just got water everywhere.
Drenched. No. But I was like, how ludicrous, though, false hope. 25% more new and improved holy water.
How do you improve holy water?
That's what I said. I was like, so, but
that took a turn I wasn't expecting. Well, I think we submit to careers. I see people who are in careers, they're miserable. They can't serve their family. They can't serve God. They can't. But because they've submitted to something, because they wanted to survive, or even maybe their aspirations were higher than that. Maybe they weren't trying to survive; they wanted to provide for their children or their family, and so they made a career choice based on resources or finances that cost them significant time, money, effort, and I do think we find ourselves depending on things, even government. I think we can be guilty of believing they're going to resolve the problem, or the church is going to resolve the problem, and we have these false hopes that are dangerous, extremely dangerous. And our time is going away. This conversation is taken.
It's a good turn.
No, it's a good thing that I think we've talked about.
Just looking at the water.
Yeah, I'm going to skip some of the things, but it says our princes are being hanged by their thumbs. Our elders are treated with contempt. Young men are led away to work at millstones, and boys stagger under heavy loads of wood. The elders no longer sit at the city gates. The young men no longer dance and sing. Joy has left our hearts. Our dancing has turned to mourning. So since we've pretty much the whole podcast has taken this bent, the question I want to ask is, what kind of things steal our joy? What are some things that just zap your joy?
I think anything that we deem to be long-term, that we don't have a solution to, we don't see an answer in the near future, that is protracted, has a tendency to steal joy. It could be a host of things, but I think the longer the duration of any struggle or challenge, the more likely we are to forfeit joy.
I think it's feeling powerless in the situation. Like, our enemies raped the women in Jerusalem and the young girls in all the towns of Judah, and that's a situation where they are powerless. Mm-hmm. And when you don't have power, and when you don't feel like you have agency in your own life, that causes a whole host of problems and feeling like you can't change your situation.
Yeah, we were having a discussion earlier about a young child who was struggling with a sickness, a disease, and how difficult that would be as a parent or grandparent to see that child struggling and suffering, and you can't fix it. You can't alleviate that. To me, that would be a joy stealer, killer, quicker for me even than my own personal struggles and pains and losses. As Alyssa said, when other people that are near and dear are suffering and you can't do anything about it, it's difficult to maintain joy.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there are so many things that I think the more protracted and long-term it is, the more likely it is to.
Yes.
It's not like I can't think of a time that, like, one day you had it and the next day you didn't, that it was a single instant. I mean, there probably are some, but what I find is the leaking of the joy almost, over a period of time and then you reach a point where you're
depleted. Yes,
you don't have anything left.
Yeah, I think I didn't mean to jump you. I think 17 addresses that, where he says our hearts are sick and weary and our eyes grow dim with tears. That's been a process.
Yeah, well, so verse 17 is where I wanted to ask. I guess it'll be the last question for this, since we're here. What does being heart sick look like? I'll tell you how I see it physically take place the most. Spouses who live together for many, many years, and then one of them dies. The statistics are clear how often the next one will die.
Yeah.
I mean, many times the same day. They're like, okay, I'm heartbroken. That's the way I would describe it. My heart is broken. I recently read a book called Raising Good Humans. And like one of the things it said in it, was talking about with your kids, that one of the worst things you can do is say, don't cry, suck it up, and because it is emotionally they're broken, and if not corrected can have some physical ramifications, in maybe mental ramifications more. And so maybe you can describe some times or places where you saw heart sickness and how it affected people.
Well, I truly believe a lot of physical sickness is associated with, quote, heart sickness, the emotions and feelings that aren't ever addressed or healed or tended to, dealt with, whatever that needs to look like. That a lot, and there are statistics out there all over the place, but that will lead us to believe that a significant number of physical issues actually deal with emotional or heart issues that have not been corrected and dealt with. So it is
eating disorders.
Yes,
and just a lot of different things.
A tremendous amount of things.
Yeah. Alyssa?
Yeah, I think we like to have very clear, like, this is mental health, this is physical health, this is these spiritual health, but all of them interact with each other. And when you're dealing with an issue in one, it affects the others. And we have to really think of those issues holistically, I think, to get past them. And what I love is that a lot of books of the Bible, like, they end on, like, happier notes, but this ended. This is the end of not only the chapter but the whole book, and it's like, have you rejected us?
Yeah. So, I have one more question that I won't going to answer because we're out of time, but we can make as much time as we want. But that last verse there. Last two verses, really, 21, 22, it says, "Restore us, O Lord, and bring us back to you again. Give us back the joys we once had." Last verse, "Or have you utterly rejected us? Are you angry with us still?" How does a person tell if they have been rejected or if they will be restored? How does a person tell? I mean, that is a depressing way to end a writing. How would you like to pick up your dad's journal, your mom's journal, to read for their funeral, and the last words they wrote go, "I don't know whether I'm rejected or restored"?
I think, so we talked about how you lose joy and all of that, and I think that the writing of it or the saying of it is important because that gets it out there. I think that them asking this was part of the healing, that seeing that God maybe hadn't rejected them completely. That's why people journal, because it gets it out of their head where they just are thinking thoughts and it gets them onto paper, and it helps you work through that and actually put words to it. I think that was part of the healing, was to say, you know what, God, I don't know even what's going on. Have you just left us? And so I think that I don't know.
So it's kind of therapeutic in putting it down there. Yeah. For me, there have been times when I pray and I ask the Lord, are you angry at me? Is this just life? Is there a lesson to be learned here, or have I just offended you and angered you in some way? If so, then show me so that I can take the corrective steps and measures. I don't know that I've ever asked him, "Have you utterly rejected me?" Meaning, I've never felt to the point that I wouldn't recover or the relationship will be restored to that degree. But have I at times felt like God was perhaps angry? Yeah.
I think you'd use the word therapeutic. I think there are some things that can only begin healing once you have emptied yourself up. You have to say it to move forward. If you don't, it's you stuck with it inside. And that's the same reason why you don't tell kids to stop crying when they're hurt.
They need to get it out,
emotionally or physically. Mm-hmm. Yeah, don't tell them to suck it up. Be a man. Whatever we say, It don't hurt. Well,
it does hurt. It's bleeding and swollen.
Right.
Yeah, it hurts.
But we do the same. I do, and I'm guilty of this. I would acknowledge I'm terribly guilty of this. A physical wound is easier for me to say, let's deal with it, than an unseen wound that somebody may be struggling with. And I want them, okay, come on. Just put a smile on your face and let's move on. Your attitude sucks. And it does hurt. They're hurt. I just can't see it as clear. Don't understand what it is. Good. Jay, you want to close us in prayer?
Lord, thank you for reminding us that we do go through seasons and times where we lose joy, that we mourn and we have loss. It's part of this life, but also we thank you for reminding us that you never leave us, you never forsake us, and that you are always faithful. Lord, for those who may be watching or listening that are going through a difficult season, that are lamenting right now, whose hearts are heavy and broken, and they are hopeless, I pray that you would speak hope and peace to them today. Let them know that you've not forsaken, you've not forgotten, and that your love is everlasting, and that you will minister to them according to your plan and purpose and for your glory and honor. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen.